She was just serving lunch until he tried to humiliate her. What happened next left the whole restaurant speechless. You ever watch someone get too confident too fast? Like, they walk into a room thinking they already own it. Loud voice, big talk, the whole look at me energy. That was Douglas Merriweather, the guy who stormed into Le Vibe Kitchen on a Thursday afternoon in downtown Phoenix, Arizona, thinking he was God's gift to the business world. Now, this place wasn't some corner diner. It was the kind of restaurant where lunch meant linen napkins, lemon zest on the water glasses, and appetizers that came with names longer than your resume. Kendra Holloway had been working there 5 days a week, 10-hour shifts, for the past 2 years. She'd learned to smile when she didn't feel like it and juggle 4 tables while remembering who had allergies to what. But most people had no idea she spoke 3 languages, because most people didn't bother to ask. Kendra was 29. Brown skin, tightly coiled hair pulled into a low puff, sharp almond eyes that noticed everything, and a voice so calm it could slice tension without raising the volume. She hadn't planned on being a waitress this long, not with her degree in linguistics and international relations, but after her mother passed unexpectedly, she had to take care of her 2 younger brothers. Dreams had to wait. Bills didn't. That afternoon, her shift had started like any other. By 12:15, the lunch crowd was already thick with suits and startup bros, some tapping away on laptops, others deep in half-fake conversations. Her section included table 9, 4 people, all dressed in that casually expensive way that screams, "I don't shop sales." Among them sat the man himself, Douglas Merriweather. White guy, mid-50s, silver hair gelled into place, button-down shirt too crisp to be comfortable. You could tell he liked being the center of gravity in any room. He had this way of leaning back in his chair like the floor should thank him for showing up. "Make sure mine's gluten-free," he told Kendra without looking her in the eye. "I don't trust kitchens unless I see 'em sweat." She gave a polite nod. "Understood, sir. The chef uses a tamari-based soy, not wheat." That caught his attention, barely. He glanced up like she'd said something she wasn't supposed to know. Then the woman across from him, French accent, probably an investor, placed her order in rapid-fire French, talking about the beurre blanc and whether the salmon was wild-caught. Without missing a beat, Kendra responded, in clean, fluent French. Even offered to double-check with the kitchen. Their exchange lasted maybe 15 seconds, tops. The woman smiled, impressed. Her tone relaxed. It was natural, easy, but not for Douglas. "Whoa," he said loudly, setting down his fork. "Look at you. Parlez-vous, waitress?" Kendra kept her smile in place, but you could see her posture shift, just slightly. "It's French, sir," she said calmly. "Yes, I speak it." He chuckled, leaned back in his chair, clearly amused. "Well, if you're so smart," he said, dragging out the words like he was winding up for something, "why don't you translate this?" And then, out of nowhere, he spit out a sentence in German. Not slow, not clean, just loud and jumbled. Everyone at the table turned toward him. The woman with the French accent blinked. One of the other men shifted in his seat. Even the hum of other conversations around them seemed to dip for a second. Kendra stood still, one hand on the edge of her notepad, the other by her side. Calm, steady. But the pause in that moment? It wasn't about the language anymore. It was about what was coming next. Kendra didn't flinch, not even a blink. Douglas looked pleased with himself, like he'd just played a winning hand at a poker table. He crossed his arms and leaned back, eyes on her, waiting for her to stutter, to back off, to say, "I don't know," and walk away. But instead, she looked at him, right in the eyes this time, and repeated his sentence word for word, in perfect German. Then she added the formal version he had meant to say, followed by the translation in English. "The mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open." Her tone was even, quiet. Not loud, not theatrical, just clear. That silence that had started around the table, it grew heavier. The French woman's eyes widened. One of the other men, maybe Douglas's VP, cleared his throat. You could hear the sound of a fork touching a plate from the next table over. Douglas tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "Well, you practiced that, didn't you?" he said. "Memorized phrases, I bet. Google Translate, maybe?" "I don't use Google Translate," Kendra replied, still calm. "But I can explain the context if you like." That quote is often misattributed to Einstein, but it's actually older. The version you used had a grammatical mistake, though. You used the informal second person when referring to an abstract noun. In German, that's considered a bit clumsy. Now, the tension wasn't just in the air. It was sitting on Douglas's shoulders. The French woman leaned in slightly. "She's right," she said with a smirk. "I studied in Berlin. I haven't heard anyone use Dane with Geist since a frat boy tried to flirt with my roommate." That one landed. The younger man at the table bit his lip, clearly fighting a laugh. Douglas's smirk faltered. He tried to wave it off. All right, we get it. She speaks languages. That's cute." Cute. That word. Kendra's jaw didn't clench, and she didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she smiled, wider this time. "I majored in linguistics and international relations at Arizona State," she said, voice still calm. "Spent a summer in Belgium doing an immersion program. I picked up German from a roommate, Mandarin from my thesis work. But yes, today I'm your waitress." Now the laughter that Douglas had tried to force a minute ago, it was gone. Just awkward glances and forks being pushed across plates. "Let's just order," Douglas muttered. "We're burning daylight." But his voice didn't carry the same authority anymore. It fell flat. As Kendra moved on to take the final order, the tension didn't vanish. It just changed shape. Now it hovered over the table like a question no one wanted to answer. And across the restaurant, other staff had started to notice. A server walking by raised an eyebrow at Kendra. The bartender paused mid-shake. Word travels fast in a place like that, and people like Douglas never think anyone's watching until they are. A manager named Troy, mid-30s, sharp eyes, shaved head, stepped out from the back. Not because of a complaint. He knew his staff. He knew Kendra. He'd seen her break up a wine-splashed birthday meltdown last week with a smile and a cloth napkin. Now, watching the mood shift at table 9, he didn't step in. He didn't need to. He just watched. When Kendra walked back toward the kitchen to input the order, one of the busboys gave her a look, kind of half proud, half curious. "What'd he say?" he whispered. Kendra gave a half shrug. "Something about parachutes," he snorted. Guess his ego didn't open. She didn't laugh, because this wasn't funny. Not really. She'd dealt with this kind of thing before. People surprised that someone who looked like her could speak French, or German, or understand things they thought were beyond her reach. Most just stayed quiet. But some needed to make a point. They needed to remind you who they thought you were. But what Douglas didn't know, what no one at that table knew yet, was that the worst part of this wasn't the language. It was what came next. Back in the kitchen, Kendra entered the orders with smooth fingers and a blank face, but inside, something burned. Not anger exactly, not even shock. Just that slow, steady heat that builds after too many times being underestimated. She didn't need to prove anything to Douglas. Not to anyone, really. But she also wasn't going to let that moment pass like it was nothing. Not anymore. At the pass, Chef Marco gave her a curious glance. "Everything all right out there?" She nodded. "Just another ego with a business card." He smirked. "You want me to spit in his risotto?" "Tempting," she said. "But no, let the food speak for itself." As the entrees cooked, Kendra poured 4 glasses of still water, grabbed a small bread basket, and headed back to table 9. She could feel the eyes. From the bar. From 2 other tables. Even Troy was casually standing near the host's podium, pretending to look at a schedule. At the table, the atmosphere had changed again. Less smug, more tense. The French woman was scrolling through her phone. The younger guy was poking at his salad like it had insulted him. And Douglas was doing what people like him do when they get embarrassed in public. He was getting ready to double down. As Kendra placed the water on the table, Douglas spoke again, but this time his tone had dropped an octave, quieter, slower. "You know," he said, "it's always the ones who think they're smarter than they are that end up in aprons." Kendra turned to him. "I'm sorry?" she asked. Polite, controlled. "You heard me." He leaned forward, elbows on the table now. "Degrees are nice, but this isn't a college seminar. It's a restaurant. We're not here to get corrected. We're here to get service." There it was. He'd been embarrassed, and now he needed to remind everyone of his status. That old trick, shift the attention back, throw a little shame, reassert the power balance. But what he didn't realize was that this wasn't just about language anymore. It never was. Kendra looked at him, not with anger, not even pity, just stillness. I treat every guest with respect, she said, but that doesn't mean I forget who I am just because I'm holding a tray. Douglas scoffed. Yeah, and who are you? That sentence hit the table like a dropped plate. The Frenchwoman looked up from her phone. Even the VP blinked like he'd just realized this was going somewhere much deeper than lunch. Kendra didn't blink, didn't back down. I'm someone who didn't have the luxury of coasting through life, she said, her voice level. I'm someone who graduated early, who speaks 4 languages, who works 2 jobs to keep my brothers in school, and still shows up every morning with my head held high. That's who I am. Douglas rolled his eyes. So what? You want a gold star? A pity promotion? Kendra tilted her head. No, I just want to finish doing my job without being belittled. For a moment, the room stood still. Then Troy stepped over, breaking the moment, calm, but with purpose. Everything all right here? He asked, looking directly at Douglas. Douglas shifted in his chair. Just a difference in perspective, that's all. Troy's eyes didn't move. Well, we don't allow disrespect on our floor, he said, to staff or guests. Kendra didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She walked back toward the kitchen, not fast, not slow, just steady. And the thing was, everyone at that table saw it, saw the way she handled herself, saw the way she didn't lose control, didn't raise her voice, didn't even try to win. She just told the truth and let the truth do the talking. But Douglas wasn't done yet, because people like him never stop until they've embarrassed themselves completely, and that moment was closer than he thought. Troy stayed near the table after Kendra left. He didn't say anything else, just stood there with his arms crossed and that quiet, managerial presence that says, I'm watching. Douglas didn't look at him. Instead, he looked around the room like he needed someone, anyone, to back him up. But no one was on his side now. Even his VP kept his eyes on the table. Kendra came back a few minutes later with their entrees balanced perfectly on her tray. She placed each plate in front of them without a word, only offering a soft enjoy after setting the last dish. But before she could turn to leave, Douglas opened his mouth again. I was just joking, you know, he said, a little too loud. Kendra paused. I'm sure you were, she replied, her tone so even it almost didn't sound like a response. She turned to go. Wait. He sat back, clearly frustrated. You know, in Germany, they wouldn't hire someone like you to do what you're doing now, not at this level. Kendra stopped mid-step. She turned back slowly, but this time it wasn't just her eyes that spoke. It was her entire posture. She set the tray down, folded her hands in front of her, and looked Douglas square in the face. You want to talk about Germany? She said. Fine. I'll tell you something. Her voice still wasn't raised, but now it had weight. I was in Frankfurt for 6 months during my final year. Worked as an interpreter for a nonprofit that helped refugees from Syria, Congo, and Iraq. I sat in meetings between policymakers and families who didn't know if they'd be deported the next morning. I translated for mothers who hadn't seen their children in 2 years, for kids who hadn't spoken since losing everything. I stood in rooms where the words I chose could change whether someone got shelter or nothing. Now the room was silent again, not from shock, but from attention. I was the youngest person on that team, the only American, the only black woman in the room. And every time someone looked at me like I didn't belong, I remembered what my grandmother told me. Your worth is not measured by who notices it, but by how you carry it when they don't. Her voice cracked just for a second, not from emotion, but from truth, raw and plain. Douglas sat back, jaw tight, but no words came out this time. Kendra didn't move. So if I'm taking your order today, she said, it's not because I failed. It's because I made a choice to come home, to take care of the people I love, to hold it down while my brother finishes community college and my youngest gets through high school without ending up another statistic. You call that a step down? That says more about you than it ever will about me. The French woman leaned forward now, hands clasped. That was beautiful, she said softly. Kendra gave a small nod, then turned and walked away. Back in the kitchen, she didn't cry. She didn't fume. She just took a deep breath and started wiping down the prep counter like it was just another part of the shift. But Troy came in after her, a to-go cup in his hand. Water with lemon, he said, and the owner called. She saw it on the cameras. You handled that exactly right. Kendra raised an eyebrow. Didn't even know she watched during lunch. She does now. She accepted the cup and took a long sip. The water was cold, sharper than usual, but she needed that. Something clean after something so ugly. Troy gave her a look. One of those quiet, respectful ones. You need to take a break? I'm good, she said. I want to finish this shift. Because even when the air gets heavy and the words cut deep, people like Kendra know how to stand tall. And sometimes that's all it takes to make someone like Douglas realize he didn't just lose a battle, but something inside Douglas had shifted. Not because he wanted it to, but because the mirror she held up couldn't be ignored anymore. The next 20 minutes passed in weird silence at table 9. No more sarcasm, no more posturing, just quiet forks scraping plates and sideways glances. Douglas barely touched his food. The VP ate slowly, like he didn't want to be there at all. The French woman looked around the restaurant like she was trying to find a different conversation to join. It wasn't the food, it was the energy, the kind that hangs in the air when someone realizes they're not as clever, as untouchable as they thought they were. Douglas pushed his plate aside and signaled for the check, not even finishing his quinoa-seared sea bass. His fingers tapped the table as he waited, the rhythm uneven. You could see it, the cracks starting to show. He'd come in riding high, expecting another ego-boosting lunch, and instead he got a hard truth served up without a single raised voice. Kendra walked over with the check, folded neatly inside the bill holder. Whenever you're ready, she said, her tone polite but distant. Douglas didn't look at her, just opened it, glanced at the total, and pulled out a black company card. But then, something strange happened. He paused. His hand stayed still for a second longer than it needed to. Then he put the card down and looked up. Not with anger, with something else. Something closer to confusion. Or maybe shame. Kendra, right? He asked, voice lower than before. She nodded. He cleared his throat. Look, I didn't mean to insult you. She didn't respond right away. Just waited. Douglas let out a breath. I guess I've been in rooms for so long where talking over people is just what you do to keep up. You were right to call me out. I just didn't expect it to hit like that. Kendra tilted her head, arms crossed. You didn't expect someone like me to hit back. He nodded slowly. Yeah. She stayed quiet. He looked down again, like the words were sticking in his throat. I've worked my way through a lot of rooms, but I don't think I ever had to fight for a seat the way you clearly have. That's because people move chairs for you before you even ask, she replied. That one hit hard. Even the VP glanced away. Douglas swallowed. Maybe it's time I stop expecting that. The French woman finally spoke. It's not about being perfect, she said gently. It's about being able to hear someone when they tell you the truth. Douglas gave a single nod. Then he signed the bill, added a generous tip, and slid it back toward Kendra. But not before pausing again. Your brothers are lucky, he said. They've got someone who's got more strength than most of the execs I sit across from every day. Kendra didn't smile, but her eyes softened just a little. I know, she said. They don't always see it yet, but they will. As she turned to walk away, Douglas sat back in his chair, not like a man satisfied with a meal, but like someone who had just been handed a file on his own blind spots and didn't quite know what to do with it. Kendra walked to the back, where Troy was waiting. What'd he say? He asked. Something close to sorry. You believe him? Kendra shrugged. Doesn't matter, I wasn't doing it for him. That was the truth, because people think moments like that are about getting even, about the mic drop. But for Kendra, it was never about that. It was about keeping her voice steady in a place that tried to ignore it. It was about standing tall, not to be seen, but because she refuses to shrink. But that wasn't the end, not yet, because sometimes the lesson sticks with people longer than the shame. And Douglas? He wasn't done learning. Later that day, around 5:45 p.m., Kendra was clocking out. She'd changed into a hoodie and sneakers, hair tied back even tighter now, and her apron folded under one arm. Most of the lunch crowd had disappeared hours ago, replaced by couples trickling in for early dinner. The rhythm had shifted, the pressure had dipped. She was about to head out when Troy waved her down from the office window. "You got a sec?" he asked. "Depends," she said. "If it's about covering Friday, I swear I'll fight you." He cracked a smile. "Nah, it's something else." Inside, he handed her a tablet with an email pulled up. It was from the corporate inbox. A short message, but clear. It was from Douglas. Subject: today. Message: I don't know what I walked into that made me feel like I had to be the loudest voice in the room. I know I spoke from a place of arrogance, and I saw myself reflected in someone who had every right to put me in my place. Please thank Kendra for her grace. If she's ever interested in joining the international client team, tell her she has my personal recommendation. Kendra stared at the screen for a long time, not because she was flattered, not even because she was impressed, because she didn't expect it. Troy leaned against the desk. "You thinking about it?" "I'm thinking it's wild how the world works sometimes," she said. He nodded. "It's not nothing, though. That door's real, if you want to walk through it." She didn't answer right away, just handed the tablet back. "I'll think about it," she said. But as she stepped outside into the early Phoenix dusk, what stayed with her wasn't the offer. It was the fact that for once, someone in a position of power had been forced to sit in discomfort long enough to recognize it. Because the truth is, most people never get called out. They move through rooms like Douglas did, unchecked, unchallenged. They laugh at people like Kendra. They treat her like background noise. Until the day they realize the waitress speaks 4 languages. Until the day they hear her story and feel something shift inside them. Until the day they can't look away. It's not about shaming them into silence. It's about making them stop long enough to listen. Kendra didn't go to work that morning expecting to school anyone. She went in hoping for smooth tables, a few good tips, and maybe 5 minutes to breathe between lunch and dinner rush. But life has a way of throwing tests at you when you least expect them. And sometimes, the person handing you that test thinks you're the one being tested. What Douglas never realized, until it was too late, was that he was the one on trial. And he didn't fail. But he came real close. The lesson wasn't in the translation. It was in the grace. Kendra didn't raise her voice, didn't storm out, didn't try to humiliate him. She just spoke facts. Calm, direct, human. And it hit harder than any shouting ever could. Not because she wanted to teach him something, but because he left her no choice. But the real takeaway? Some people will only change when the mirror talks back. And today, that mirror had a name, a story, and a whole lot more power than they were ready for. Kendra never told her brothers about the incident. She didn't need to. That night, she came home to find the youngest asleep on the couch with a history book on his chest, and the middle one trying to cook spaghetti without burning the sauce. Life kept moving. Rent still needed to be paid, gas tank still half full, nothing glamorous about any of it. But she sat down for a moment, just breathing, just existing. And that mattered more than anything Douglas Merriweather could offer in an email, because it reminded her, dignity isn't given by a title, a degree, or a paycheck. Dignity is how you carry yourself when someone tries to drag your name through the dirt. It's choosing not to flinch. It's standing your ground with truth, not spite. That's what people often forget. The world's full of folks who think being loud makes them right. That interrupting someone proves intelligence. That belittling others gives them status. But real power? It moves quiet. It doesn't flex. It doesn't need to. It speaks clearly, waits for silence, and then delivers truth like a blade, sharp, clean, and final. Kendra didn't become a hero that day. She wasn't trying to. She just refused to shrink. And sometimes, that's enough to shift the air in a room. Enough to knock a man off his pedestal without even raising your hand. So here's the thing. If you're ever underestimated, if someone tries to put you in a box you've already outgrown, if they laugh at your dreams because of your job title, your background, your skin, your silence, remember Kendra. Remember how she didn't perform for applause. She spoke because it was necessary. She stood because someone needed to see her do it. And somewhere out there, someone like Douglas is rethinking the way they move through the world, not because they wanted to, but because someone made them stop, and that someone didn't need to yell. They just needed to be heard. So now, ask yourself, when the moment comes, will you let someone else decide your value? Or will you speak your truth anyway? Because sometimes the loudest power in the room is the one that doesn't need permission to show up. If this story hit home for you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And if you've ever been the person who got overlooked, mocked, or talked down to, leave a comment. Your voice matters here, every single time.